Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to Phoenix Comicon 2014. My guest today is Mr. Jim Butcher. He, of course, needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway. Mr. Butcher goes by the title Long Shot on a lot of online locales. It's a reference to the statistic that only 3 in every 1,000 people who attempt to become published authors actually make it. Never tell this man the odds. We are now 15 books into the Harry Dresden series. It's 15 books. The 15th book, Skin Game, published last week. He's, of course, the author of the Codex Alera series.
This is going to take forever.
Upcoming Cinder Spires as well. Is he finished yet? Not by a long shot. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jim Butcher.
So I've got a song stuck in my head, which occasionally happens. Normally it's like just some inane thing, but at this point it's a fan modification of the theme song to Game of Thrones. It's like a group of people singing it, together with an action figure of Tyrion Lannister just spinning around. And once it's heard, it cannot be unheard. So now, anytime you watch Game of Thrones, you just watch because you find yourself singing because it just makes sense. Anyway, I'm still enraged over that whole. Because, you know, I haven't read past the first book, so the series is new. No, I read the first book when I was like 19 and was just like, I don't like anybody, there's nobody to root for, it's not a series that I'm digging. And, but watching TV, it's different because there's boobs. And there's all these characters that I just love to watch, you know. I wanted there to be a spin-off series. I wanted there to be a cop series of Tyrion and Bronn just running King's Landing. Because that would have been awesome. We totally could have done that. And I want Arya and the Hound to have their own series. Actually, I want it to be an anime series with like this giant hound, you know, 15-foot tall hound, and the teeny 2-foot tall Arya. Because that would also make sense. But anyway. I guess we'll talk about stuff other than fandom at some point. It's hard for me to get my nerd on these days at times. So, what are we talking about?
Well, do you want to tell us a little bit about the Cinder Spires series? There's buzz about it, and we don't have much hard information.
The Cinder Spires. The first book is called The Aeronauts Windlass because there are words like aeronauts and windlass, so you know it's steampunk. The Cinder Spires is, I kind of don't want to call it steampunk, I kind of want to call it steam opera, but then I thought maybe I shouldn't try and invent my own genre, and I'll just call it steampunk. But it's really somewhere between space opera and steampunk. It's Hornblower meets the X-Men. Only that doesn't sound very steampunk either, so I say it's Hornblower meets the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And because that's steampunk here. But anyway, it's a fantasy series. It's to a great degree, it's multiple viewpoint characters. The setting of the story is a little bit more like the Dresden Files because things kind of get compiled into one terrible weekend. So it's got a little bit more of the pace of the Dresden Files, but it's got the multiple viewpoint characters to mess around with. I would like to say that people are going to love it because it's got a kind of a nifty story world, or that they're going to enjoy the mythology of the world that gets set up, or the characters, or the plot, but really they're going to like it because it's got talking cats. captains, and yeah, they're maybe some cats, yeah. You know, I would like to say that that's the, you know, all these other things are what's going to make the story cool, but it's the cats are going to steal the show. They're going to upstage everyone. I know they are. I love writing them because writing them is so much fun, and you know, and they're almost as good as they think they are, which just makes it worse. But anyway, but yes, we've got airships and pirate captains and a great deal of just general fun and dueling and manners and things like that. Anyway, the first book, it would have been done. It's a horrible dental things happened to me. So I lost about 2.5 weeks of my April. I spent them on medically sanctioned opiates during that time. You know, I had my dentist going, "Are you sure you don't want more?" No, I'm good. I've been watching the Weather Channel for like 3 hours. And it's still interesting, so I think I've got enough drugs. But I'll be finishing it up and then starting the next Dresden Files book. So I know that will relieve my editor, so that'll be coming out probably sometime next year.
Great. The wise internet tells me that you wrote Stormfront to prove a point to your writing instructor, and that you wrote Codex Alera to sort of settle a bet. Was there some kind of epic conflict that led to the writing of Cinder Spires, or did it just come out of your brain?
Well, it wasn't really an epic conflict. It was just more along the lines of overhearing a conversation at a convention where somebody was saying, "Oh, well, sure, the cosplay board is great, but when has there really been a really popular steampunk series?" And there was a big discussion going on over my shoulder while I was walking around the convention floor one day. And plus, I wanted to write something that I could finally cosplay somebody from if I wanted to. Because, you know, I like to get my nerd on. And there's not really anybody in the Dresden Files I can do terribly well. I'm not skinny enough for Butters. I'm not scrawny enough for Butters. Yeah. But anyway, so that was part of the reason for it. And then plus steampunk cosplay is really cool. You know, I'm just kind of enjoying all these outfits and everything that's happening. It's like, ooh, I'm gonna have to start building this stuff into worlds, and that would be a lot of fun. And so basically, I was just having my nerdy fun at home, and then I thought, well, maybe this should be a book. And I showed some of it to the beta readers. The beta readers were like, "This is excellent." And I'm like, "It is." Okay, then let's try this. So.
You recently said in an interview that Titanian man became like a fish needs a bicycle. Harry's constantly surrounded by women like Molly and Murphy and Charity. What inspires the particularly powerful women of the Dresden Files series?
Oh, probably Princess Leia. You know, I mean, she was kind of the first action heroine that I remember seeing. You know, the first thing she does is stand up and blast somebody and smuggle some plans to, you know, the most dangerous installation in the galaxy off of ship, right under Darth Vader's nose. So, you know, she's kind of cool. And then from there, you know, it's like I just don't see the point of writing characters who aren't interesting and engaged and involved in what's going on in the story, and that's how it goes.
So, what was the idea behind making Harry as a counterpoint to that, sort of a bit of a chauvinist?
Because the whole point of making Harry a bit of a chauvinist was to just get him kicked in the shins over and over. I mean, he's not so much a chauvinist as he's kind of on the noble end of it. He thinks he's doing good, and which is all right because I'm pretty much on the noble end of it myself. I think I'm doing good, but again, he gets kicked in the shins over and over for it. I mean, there's just if there's any way to make him, you know, to make him hesitate to pull the trigger or to throw the punch or whatever it is, it's like the girl can smile at him and stab him, and that's it's going to work every time.
Well, before we get to the audience questions, I'd like to ask one or two more, but I think we can have people start lining up in the middle here if anybody has any questions that they'd like to ask Jim Butcher. See the gentleman there at the microphone, he will be fielding questions. You began by talking about having a song stuck in your head. I've noticed that music is very important for the Dresden Files. You have Wagnerian opera at climaxes, you have Queen at climaxes. What brings the music into the Dresden Files for you?
I've watched too many movies. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, there's cool music playing when important things happen, and occasionally I like that to happen. Be reflected in Dresden Files as well. It's just a lot of fun, and I think it adds. The whole point of when you're writing a novel is the great part about writing a novel is you only have to do half the work of telling the story. I do my half of the work, and then you're doing your half of the work because you're making the story in your brain. And if I can give you a bit of a soundtrack to go with the story in your brain, so much the better. I mean, that's gonna help as well. So, I mean, if you just watch the lightsaber fights in episode 1 without playing Duel of the Fates in the background, it's like, it's all right. But once you add the cool music to it, it's like, ooh, okay, that's significant now. Music changes everything.
And staying with the theme of music for just a moment, Chicago, setting the Dresden Files, is well known as sort of the home and birthplace of electric blues. When it came time to combine music and magic, you chose polka. What was behind that?
I listen to a lot of Weird Al. His pop culture polka songs really, I just love them to death because it'll take all kinds of songs and blend them into a medley, a polka-ized medley of various things. Angry White Boy Polka is just one of the most hilarious polkas ever. And the great thing about it is it actually takes a whole lot more skill to play those songs polka than it does to play them band. And you just kind of gotta be a little bit shocked by that. It's like, wow, he had to work really, really hard to make this happen. It takes a whole lot of skill. Why isn't he doing chart-topping song? Because he's busy doing polka. Okay, I got it. He's doing stuff that's more fun. So, but yeah, so polka. When it came to Butters, it needed to be polka. Butters is really, if you want to cast somebody for it, we'll cast like about 1989 era Weird Al Yankovic. You know, maybe a little bit earlier, maybe about 1984 when he's still doing Eat It.
And is that why you're growing your hair back out?
Why I'm growing my hair back out? I told everybody it was going to grow back out. Nobody listened to me. Jeez.
All right, well, let's kick it over to the audience.
Good morning.
Good morning, Jim. Hey, right before I ask my question, can we get a Polka Will Never Die? Ready? 1, 2, 3. Polka will never die! Hey, Jim.
Hi.
I'm Cassandra, and I actually want to hear you tell the story about that Codex Alera. I haven't heard it in
the
a long
Codex
time.
Alera? Okay.
It's a fabulous story.
We'll set the Wayback Machine for 1998, 1999, somewhere right in there. And the Del Rey Online Writers Workshop has just started. And so it's a bunch of us that haven't been published yet, and we're involved in this online writers workshop. And we're talking about everything to do with writing. And so as you can imagine, it's the internet, so it's basically a bunch of loudmouths on the internet, and I'm one of them. Which I'm still a loudmouth on the internet, mind you. I have some books published now, but at the time, it was just a bunch of us nobodies who were aspiring writers, and so we're furiously arguing all these different things and sharing bits of our writing and critiquing one another and slashing each other to bits and sort of all thinking to ourselves, these are the people I have to beat. And so the discussions got pretty animated, which is to say, you hit the reply button and then the caps lock and then you start typing. But a particular discussion had come up, and there were two sides of the argument, and the argument was writer's originality versus the holy idea. And with capital H, capital I, the holy idea. If you came up with a good enough idea, that no matter how terrible you wrote it, if the idea was good enough, the book would be a success. And that's what you should look for, is the book. And they said, as their example, they said, look at Jurassic Park. clone dinosaurs. That could not have missed. That idea could not miss, no matter how terribly it was written, and it was. And then there was another side of the argument that said, listen, the important thing about writing a story is not that you come up with an awesome original idea that nobody's ever done before, but that you put your own spin and originality onto the idea. And that side was, how many versions of Romeo and Juliet have we seen? And you can still see good versions of it still being done. So, and I was kind of leading that side, and so there was a flame war going back and forth, and finally the guy that was the loudest mouth on the other side looks at me and says, why don't you put your money where your mouth is, and why don't you let me give you a terrible idea, and let me see you write it into something worthwhile? And being, the loudmouth on the internet at the time, I wrote him back and I said, no, I tell you what, why don't you give me 2 terrible ideas, and I'll use them both? The guy says, fine, and he says, first terrible idea that I want you to use is Lost Roman Legion. I am so sick of Lost Roman Legion stories, all the Lost Roman Legion should have been found by now. So that's my first terrible idea, is Lost Roman Legion. I'm like, fine. I said, what's your next terrible idea? And he says, Pokemon. I am sick of the Pokemon. And I said, all right, fine. So I went and I did some research. And I researched Roman legions, and the Lost Roman Legion that everybody usually refers to is the 9th Hibernian Legion, marched off north of the wall and never came back in England. And so I said, okay, we're going to take the 9th Hibernian Legion, we're going to assume that they marched off somewhere, and where did they go to? Land of the Pokemon. And I said, and I went and looked up Pokemon. Now, Pokemon itself is a fusion of 2 ideas. The first being a literalization of the Shinto religion and the Shinto belief that there is a divine kami or divine spirit inside all natural things, and that a tree or a river or a mountain all have a divine spirit in them, and you better respect them, and that even a pebble has a divine spirit in it, and you better respect that, but if you don't, what's it going to do? It's a pebble. And then they took that idea and they fused it with professional wrestling, and that's where Pokemon came. So I said, okay, we're going to have my Lost Roman Legion. And I looked at the Roman legions at the time, which were about half Roman legionnaires, or about half Roman citizens, about half German mercenaries, and at the kind of camp followers that surrounded the legion. And really, if you want a colonization force, you can't be much better than the Roman legion with its camp followers. They were completely autonomous. They were very used to doing what they did. They were very professional and could show up somewhere, plant crops, and just settle in. And said, okay, I'll have them go off to the land of the Pokemon, and I'm going to give them a few thousand years, and they're going to develop into this kind of bifurcated society that's centered around these big Roman metropolitan style centers. But then out in the country, it'll be all Germanic freeholds out there in the countryside. And I gave them a while to build up their culture, and said, okay, and now we're going to start the story with a boy on a farm, because that's where fantasy starts. I didn't make the rule. That's where Alara came from, and I finally went back to this guy and said, okay, you know what? And I went back a few months later and said, I think I've got a pretty good idea here, and at the time we still didn't quite know how the internet was going to work with publishing rules, so I said, I don't want to publish it here because I don't want to risk that, losing my publishing rights, because I think I can write this up into a novel and actually get it sold. And the guy writes me back and says, oh, so in other words, I'm right. And I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever, man, you're right. So he was right, and I got a 6-book deal.
Okay, so when it comes out, is Dresden going to see episode 7?
When it comes out, is Dresden going to see episode 7 at the drive-in in Aurora? And if necessary, he will call in a warden squad for security so that he can see this movie. Except they're all going to want to watch it too, because all the wardens that he deals with will be like Ramirez and
How does Harry watch TV?
How does Harry watch TV? There is an electronics store across from a park that I found on Google Earth, and closed captioning on, and there's a bench across the street. He can sit on the bench across the street and watch TV. With closed captioning. Thank you, Google Earth, for supporting my madness.
You have Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos, the three traditional Greek faiths. The mothers have already copped to having held those names. Their three traditional positions are the one who spins the thread, the one who measures it, and the one who cuts it. At this point, summer is a pretty good fit for the one who spins the thread, and winter is a pretty good fit for the one that cuts it. Who measures the thread?
You're measuring on the wrong axis, and you need to turn it about 90 degrees. That's my answer to that. You'll notice there's 3 queens in each chord. Anyway, yeah. There you go. Hi.
Hi. So my question is really about Karen Murphy, because she is my favorite. So because she's completely vanilla, and she kicks the most butt of anyone. Because she's vanilla. So I read a few of the books, and of course I fell in love with them, and then I made the mistake of watching the show. How do you personally feel about how the show took Murphy? In the show, she has a kid, dude. I mean, how do you feel about, the physical changes, it's a show, it's an actress, so what? How do you feel about how they changed it in regard to her base character?
My opinion is a little skewed because Valerie, the actress who played Murphy, was the only one on the set who actually read the books. and came up to me and was like geeking out about the series and stuff like that. And because there's very geek in her background somewhere. But she was nerdy enough to qualify as someone I would play my D&D game. So other than that. Okay, I gotta be honest, I've only watched most of the show once. That was all I needed. But the changes that got made were changes that got made kind of along the way, kind of a lot of it got foisted onto the show at the last minute. I don't know if you guys knew this, but originally the show was scheduled to do, the first season was going to be a serial, and it was going to take the plots of Stormfront and Full Moon and interweave them along the way, and kind of have the climaxes of both happen at the same time at the end of the season, which I thought was kind of cool. But then like 2 weeks before, they got a call and said, hey, we're putting a new producer on it. It's this guy here who's really awesome. He just got done doing Charmed. And he's going to be in charge, and the first thing he did was say, yeah, people don't like serials, so we're not going to do a serial, we're just going to make it episodes. And they're like, man, but we've only got like 2 weeks, there's not time to rewrite everything. And he's like, just change all the names and disconnect all the stories, that'll do. So I mean, they were sort of dealing with a lot on the set. And as far as the folks who were actually on the ground and who actually had to make the show, I really think that they made the very best show that they could, given all the restraints and complete crap they were handed that they had to work with, stuff like that. No, we're not going to do a serial. It's not going to be a plot. We're just going to, and all these actors who've been scheduled to show up during several episodes. Nah, never mind them. We'll just get different actors and actresses to play these characters along the way. It's like, it was so close. It could have been cool until that last second thing. But it could have been worse. I also saw the first treatment of the show. It could have been a lot worse.
Absolutely. Just one little bit on top of that. Since you have gained so much more fame since then, do you think there's any chance of a reboot if being done properly?
Yeah, I think there's a chance. But if something was going to happen, I wouldn't really be able to talk to anybody about it. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Although this time, I was able to say, well, if you want to do the show, you will need to have me along. And it seems to have worked out for George. So, and I think it's working out for Pat. So, hopefully, if it works out again, it'll work out again for me. In my copious spare time while doing TV show stuff.
Hello. How did Mab come to owe Endurial a favor?
How did Mab come to owe Endurial a favor? Mab has got a lot of things to get done. And you really, in the books, you only get to see bits and pieces of her job. But she has kind of an important job, which is why you never really see Mab and the Linanchi show up in the same book. Because when Mav is there, there's nobody doing Mav's job, and it's Leah's job to cover that. And when Leah's there, and when Leah shows up, Mav is busy because Mav is doing things that she can't be bothered with, some Chuck wizard in Chicago with. So she'll send Leonci to handle it instead. So the situation as it exists now did not always exist that way. The Faerie weren't always the ones who were, the Winter Fae were not always the ones who were defending the wall. And the transition when they switched over was a rough one. And so Mav had to ask a lot of favors at that point. And she's got people she's still paying off. And Duriel is one of them. Hello.
When you wrote the live journals for aspiring authors, it was great several years ago, and I know you don't have free time, but if you could make free time, have you ever thought about writing a book on writing?
Have I ever thought about writing a book on writing? I've thought about it, like I've titled it. I have never actually thought about writing it. But the book was, How to Slay Dragons, Catch Unicorns, Break into Publishing, and Other Impossible Things. But then it would just be about breaking into publishing, basically. Because the dragon and unicorn thing, I don't know, I'm not good with that. But yeah, I've considered it. It's not something I'm really, all fired up about, because mostly writing stories is something I'm still learning about very quickly, and my learning curve is still pretty high, and so I'm sort of waiting until I think I know something about writing stories before I start telling people how to do it. Mostly all the stuff that I put on my blog is just regurgitated Swain and Bickham. If you want to go read the books by Jack Bickham and White Swain. Granted, I use examples like Star Wars rather than, I think they're trying to be more academic, so they're using Homer and Ulysses and stuff like that as their examples, which aren't as much fun as Star Wars. But I'm not teaching anything new about the craft of writing. When I teach a writing class, I'm not telling anybody anything new. This is all stuff you can find out. I did my learning at the University of Oklahoma School of Professional Writing. Debbie Chester was my teacher. I think she's still a professor there. And it's just, a lot of writing, 90% of the business is just learning craft. It's not anything mystic that you have to have a super cool talent for. You just have to figure out, this is how storytelling works, and here's the various pieces and how they're put together, and then you can learn how to do it. It's a matter of practice for the most part, and then after that, then it becomes a matter of how much innate talent you have, which I did not have much in the way of innate talent. I can prove it to you. I can show you the first 8 books I wrote, except I'm not that mean. They were awful. But eventually I started listening to Debbie, and I started learning, well, this is how you put together a character. This is how you introduce a character. Here's how you write an action scene. Here's how you write a scene where you start revealing the character's feelings and intentions. And here's how you keep the story focused and moving towards a good direction. It's not easy by any means, but it's simple. I compare it to lifting an engine block out of a car. That's simple, it's not easy. And that's most of what storytelling is. This stuff is pretty simple, and you just have to practice it until you get it down. Hello.
So I've always imagined that playing like D&D with you or George or Martin or like Tolkien or something would be, well, pretty cool.
Playing D&D with Martin, oh my god.
DM, right? It's just everybody dies. Yeah.
Okay, so George runs a Warhammer campaign. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
So my question was, I know you do some role-playing games. My question was, what is your favorite RPG? Why? And can you give us a story?
The game that I run the most is Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. Probably it's kind of my home system, and I love that game. The game that I'm running at the moment is, I'm playing D&D, although D&D isn't really D&D anymore because 4th edition is like Dungeons and Warcraft or something. And while I think it is kind of a nifty game, it's not Dungeons and Dragons, and that was my issue. And so I went and got Pathfinder because I realized that my son had become 21 years of age and had never actually played D&D. Warhammer, Cthulhu, Warhammer Fantasy Battle, I mean, all these other games, yes, he played all those, but not Dungeons and Dragons. And I'm like, oh, my son, I have failed you. So I went out and got Pathfinder, and I went out and downloaded an old copy of the Keep on the Borderlands, the original Keep on the Borderlands, because that's where you start D&D. Only because it was me, I couldn't just do that. So I set the game during a fantasy world zombie apocalypse. And the Keep on the Borderlands was like one of the last human outposts, and they had to fight their way to keep on the Borderlands through all the walkers. And then in order to be let in, they had to agree to join the Expeditionary Force. The Expeditionary Force, their job was they got sent to the Caves of Chaos to make diplomatic contact with the Greenskins to form an alliance against the walkers. So the Caves of Chaos is a diplomatic mission. That is amazing fun. And we had a great deal of fun playing that out because it was zombie movie world rules. So you know, like, they'd be like going across and they'd see a crowd of walkers around an old farm horse eating it, and you know, they kind of be edging up around it. Okay, everybody keep an eye on it. Right. And you know, then they'd sneak to behind the barn, and somebody's checking out the farmhouse to see if there's any supplies they need, but they forgot to have somebody watching the zombies. And so the zombies went from like 150 yards away to they're opening one door very carefully. The zombies are right there, you know, because that's zombie movie rules. That's how it works. And so then they went out. The boys had to go out and watch zombie movies because this was my son and a couple of his friends and some of my nephews. And so they went out and checked out zombie movies. They're like, yeah, this is exactly what he's talking about. This is what they do constantly. So you know, they had to do research, you know, in order to survive the world. So they started setting, you know, zombie survival rules. Which was just amazing. Except for one of the guys had rolled, I don't know how he did it, but on 4 dice 6 he managed to roll complete snake eyes for his wisdom. And so he's a character with it. He's the magic user to boot. So he's the 18 intelligence, 3 wisdom magic user. So you know, the way he decided to play it was, you know, I'm just going to do the most ill-advised stuff I can think of, but I'm going to do it as intelligently as possible. You know, so, oh yeah, I'm definitely going to go check out the spooky barn. But, you know, I'm going to be throwing light spells. I'll use this telekinesis spell to open this door. And why are you even there? From the woods. But, yeah, that's the kind of game I play. That sort of thing. You know, they wound up, you know, they finally made friendly contact with, or more or less friendly contact with the hobgoblins. And, you know, my son walked away with a warg puppy because he was just determined. And my God, that was my mistake. Let him have that warg, you know, that warg puppy as a character, because I swear he shows up at Christmas dinner and Dad, I got a puppy. And you know, he's living on his own. He's 22 now, so he can do that if he wants to. But he shows up with his puppy that's 8 weeks old and weighs 30 pounds. I'm like, oh my God. It's like, why'd you buy the large breed puppy chow? So the dog's name is, so now I'm officially a grandfather because my son has got a puppy. And the puppy's name is Atlas. And Atlas is now about 8 months old, and you know, he's sitting, he's like this tall. And his paws are still huge. He's still grown. His head is still too big for the rest of him. And I call him the kaiju because he keeps stepping on my dog and not realizing it. So when we're playing video games, I have to get to my computer, and then Frost comes and like sprints in, you know, because I don't want to get walked on. He sprints in. And then we have to put a sheet of sheet metal up over the entrance to the desk so that the kaiju can't come back and torment Frost. Because he loves Frost and he wants to be friends with him. And Frost is just like, no, go away, newbie. I don't want anything to do with you. But anyway, that's a long rambling answer to that.
Hi there. I'm was just wondering what involvement you had with the Dresden Files RPG, and if you were considering any other projects for your other works like that.
The involvement I had with the Dresden Files RPG was mostly, a lot of it was just me panicky, sending emails to people of, no, you can't put that in the RPG, that's coming in the books, so you can't do that yet. Because these guys had dug into the book so hard that they had projected a bunch of things that I was going to write from stuff that had come before. They were going to put it in the RPG because they're like, this totally fits. And I'm like, I know it totally fits. That's why it's going in the books later. No examples. What are you kidding? I've got a living to make. My son still wants more school. Come on. By and large, it was a bunch of conversations about how the world worked, and that was most of what I did, was talk to them about the story world. I mean, they knew the stuff about the outsiders and the wall and the outer gates a long time before anybody else did, because I'd gone through and discussed that with them. And so at that point, they say, okay, we think we got what we need. We're going to go work on it, and then we'll come show it to you. And I'm like, yeah, you'll come show it to me, and I'm going to tear into it with a red pen, and that's going to be awful. We're going to write all this dialogue in the side part, just for Harry and Bob. I'm like, yeah, you're going to write all this dialogue, and I'm going to have to erase all of it. And it's been hours working at it, probably. So I'm basically a grumpy old man. And then they send it to me, and I'm starting to read it, and I get out my red pen as I'm starting to read it, and I'm like going, this is freaking hilarious. I read all the way through, and I'm like, no, I don't really have to touch any of this, and no, you guys actually just, you worked your asses off and did a really good job. And it's like, no, you can have it. This is great. This is good stuff. And so now they're working on the Dresden Files Live to do it as a LARP. So, just in case it's not nerdy enough to be around the table with your friends, you can also get dressed up in costumes and play the game and hit each other with Nerf weapons if you want to, and that'll be fine. And I'll still be the one guy who can't play it, but that's cool. That's all right. Everybody else can have a good time. I'm the one guy who can't play the Dresden Files because when I play a game, I'm a power gaming weasel, and if you're the GM, can you imagine trying to GM me in Dresden? Necessary, I'll write it that way in the next book. I don't even care if it's part of the plot, I'll put it in there. And yet, if I'm the GM, too much like work. So, so I'm the guy who can't play, but it's okay. You guys play and enjoy it. That's the point. You guys should do that.
Hello.
Hello.
If you were to sit down in a bar and have a drink with any 3 fictitious characters, either your series or anyone else's series, who would they be?
Oh my gosh. If I was going to sit down at a bar and have a drink with any 3 fictitious characters from my series, I would, golly, it would not be any of the good guys. Because they just would not think, for crying out loud. Oh, it would be Lara Ray and her sisters. There we go. If I'm going to pick from somebody else's series, gosh, I don't know. What? Tyrion Lannister? Well, he'd probably be fun to party with, I suppose. But I don't know, the whole nose thing. I mean, because in the books, I understand it's considerably worse. Okay, yeah. I don't know. Really fictitious people, for the most part. You don't want to be in the blast radius around them. Fictitious people have horrible stuff happen to them all the time, If I was going to pick anybody, I'd pick like Peter Parker, and then just sort of hope things didn't go bad, just to sort of hope he didn't get that wide-eyed, my spider senses tingling look while we were having dinner, But I don't know, fictitious people are tough. I'd rather have dinner with real people. Much less likely for there to be any excitement. Because honestly, you don't want exciting for the most part. I mean, most of the things you do every day, you fly out of a plane here, you don't want exciting. But, so.
I noticed he knew pretty quick how to sling those spells and had the correct vocabulary to do that. Was that something that he got while rehabbing with Mab, or is there like a download in Winter Mantle 101 that came with the mantle? Just curious.
Oh, did he get to download stuff with the Winter Mantle? He got to download a whole bunch of instincts with the Winter Mantle, and then it wasn't too hard for him to stick words on that worked. The magic words of the Dresden Files are mostly just there to insulate your brain against all the energy that's running through it anyway. So, one word really works pretty much as good as the other, as long as you don't know it well enough to speak it without thinking about it. But he got a bunch of instinctive knowledge that came along with it, which is the problem. I think the entire conflict of being a human being is mostly your brain being in conflict with your instincts about something. I really think that causes most problems that you have, and that's been my experience anyway. For Harry, that's just kind of been magnified a little bit more than normal ever since he picked up on the Winter Mantle. So.
Hey, so we all know you're a big Star Wars fan. If you had unlimited free time and Disney gave you total control, how would you write Star Wars 7?
Ooh, unlimited free time and Disney gave me total control, how would I write Star Wars 7? I would have to start with Solo and Organa's twins. And they would have to be like troublemaking children, like problem children, twins, is that would have to work out. I think the girl would be worse than the boy. From there, we'd have to get some grumpy old man action with Solo, because Dad still gets to be Dad. Even when Dad is old and grumpy, he's still Dad. So Solo would still get to show up at inappropriate points and shoot people first and stuff like that. I would be happy to have, she'd be in the bar flirting with some inappropriate boy and have Solo just walk in and stun him. Get in the car, we're going home, get in the ship. But I don't know. If I was doing Star Wars, I don't know. I would have to think about that a lot. I would want, I think Luke. I would have to show Luke as a person who had grown up over many years, had been dealing with a lot of problems, and had changed his perspective on many things, and was a great deal more like Kenobi as a result. But yet you could somehow look at Yoda and go, really, Yoda? Was that really your attitude about how to handle things as a Jedi Knight? And be a little bit more involved, kind of be because, let's face it, the Jedi are wizards, and we need wizards who meddle, because wizards who meddle are fun. That's how you can get wizards involved in stories, and how you make them awesome in stories, is you just can't keep them from not meddling. But other than that, I don't even know. It's a screenplay, so screenplays are weird. Screenplays are weird because you have to write them with somebody else in mind as a co-creator, or more than one somebody in mind as a co-creator. You've got to consider what a director is going to do. You've got to consider what an actor is going to do, and that sucks. These other people getting involved. Life would be great if not for other people. But these other people getting involved with your creativity. When I'm the writer, I'm used to being the show. I'll do everything and I'll figure it out, and I'll have an editor who will come along and desperately try and guide me in a wise direction here and there, to whom I often pay little attention. But when you're working in that collaborative environment, that changes things completely, and that's something that takes skill to learn how to do, learn how to deal with. And I don't want to learn how to deal with other people. I want to do my own thing.
Hi. I know you've referenced them both, so I'm just wondering, which do you prefer, the musical episode of Buffy or Dr. Horrible's Sing-Along Blog?
Which do I prefer, the musical episode of Buffy or Dr. Horrible? I'm going to go with the musical episode of Buffy just because there was a broader degree of the kind of music that you got to see. So you got to see like the flashback, old school stuff with Lysandra and Anya. You got to see there was various kinds of music there. Plus, I just liked Buffy more because it had more history, and it was more taking the characters that we knew and throwing them into this new and groovy situation. Dr. Horrible was fun, if only because it was kind of creating its own little world. But it wasn't of the same. I don't think it was of the same dramatic caliber. Although it did have it did have just that ugly downward ending, which was just an awesome thing. I mean, I was not expecting that from Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog. It's like, oh, by the way, we get to the end. There you go, everything you ever wanted. Oh man. And that's the difference between writing a comedy and writing a tragedy is you give people the results of their choices. You always do that in drama. You always give people the results of, you always give them what they've earned. And the only difference is did you make the right choice or not? And if you made the right choice, then you've got a conventional story with something like a happy ending. And if you made terrible choices like Dr. Horrible, then you get a tragedy as your ending. And tragedy's not big anymore. I thought it was awfully ballsy of Joss to go there on a little project like that. Let me write a little tragedy. So pretty cool.
I have a writing structure question, and it surrounds math, but it's not directly about math. But basically, just background. The transferring of the winter mantle from person to person has been the cause of more moments in the books where I see something happen to somebody that I've been following for 3 or 4 books, and then I throw it down, and I go get it. So no spoilers, but that's stuff. How many of those things are in your original outline because you believe in big beginnings, middles, and ends, and how many of those things are you reading the old books and going, I could totally do something like that?
Most of the stuff that's in the outline is stuff that happens to Harry. Because I wanted the Harry is kind of the center of the story. And then the events in Harry's world that are most going to drive him are there in the center of the story. Other stuff happens, it happens in a bunch of different ways. I've got multiple, I've had multiple options of how I can handle things, of who's going to be Harry's, close associate or sidekick during this next story. So that stuff that you're talking about there, I saw coming a couple of books in advance, but it could have gone one of several ways. And the character in question didn't necessarily need to survive. That was one of the options I could have gone with. People aren't safe. I need Dresden, and I killed him.
Which is the happiest ending we've had in a while.
What's that?
Harry's death was the happiest ending we've had in a while.
And people are like, that was a cliffhanger, and I'm like, no, that was not a cliffhanger, not according to writing structure. A cliffhanger is when you say what's going to happen, and then tune in next week because you don't know what's going to happen. Your character's literally hanging from a cliff. That was the end of the story. Harry set out to rescue his daughter, even if it kills him, and it did. The end. So that's not the point. But I can usually see a couple or 3 books ahead of what's going to happen, and I knew that something horrible was going to be happening to that character, and it was just a question of what flavor of horrible, and this was worst, so that's what I picked. What, you guys didn't know that's how I operate? That's But I think, what is going to be the most painful, what is going to be the most cause the most emotional conflict within the story? That's the option I almost always try and go with. That's not where I want everything to go all the time, because then I'm George Martin. And I don't want to try and be George, because we all have to be who we are. I want there to be the occasional happy ending. I honestly couldn't tell you what's going to happen to a bunch of the characters between now and the end of the series, because I don't know. And their individual fates aren't something that I have plotted out. I'm following Dresden and the big story that he's following, and these other people along the way, I hate to say it, they're expendable. So, good luck with that. Good luck to all of you. I hope that your favorite is okay, but I make no promises. All right, well.
Hey, Jim. Another question. Back in Cold Days, I'm going to save the spoilers, we had a certain revelation that kind of tied the plots of a bunch of the earlier books together in one cohesive thing. Did you have that in mind when you were writing those earlier books? Or did you kind of tie them all together later on and get the idea for that as you were writing Cold Days?
No, that was, you're talking about Nemesis, right? Yeah. No, that was there from the get-go. And has been showing up since, has been actually on stage since Grave Peril, and there were Nemesis characters showing up in Grave Peril doing things, and There are more of them. More of them have happened along the way that you don't know about yet. Which is why, I mean, that's why it's such a great threat, because it can be completely invisible and transparent, and you don't know it's there until later, then you work it out. Oh. So hopefully, I mean, my whole point in writing a lot of these books is I tried to write it so that you would get a different sense of it after you knew things later on, so that you could go back and read it again and go, oh. And I try to do it on little ways, in little things, like, I'll try and do little things like with Mouse, when eventually you work out what Mouse really is, and you go back and all of a sudden, the scene where he's attacking, ferociously attacking Harry Dresden's Snoopy doll is a lot different, because you realize, oh, that's the Snoopy doll that's got the loot bruise blood on it from several books ago, and that's what he's smelling, and that's why he's assaulting it, because he's instinctively good and awesome. But it's not stuff that, there's a lot of stuff that I don't bring out. I try not to shove stuff in everybody's face, and hopefully you'll get a different sense of it if you go back and read it again, because I like rereading books. I like rereading a book and going, oh, wait a minute, now that I know the ending of this book, this line right here is a lot funnier than it was before, and I know the writer must have been laughing his ass off when he wrote it, and I like that. Hopefully I can try and give some of that experience to readers when I'm writing too.
Hey, somewhat related to the previous question. At what point in the process did you actually come up with the overall big picture? Considering that with Stormfront, it was proving a point. You did just the one story. At what point did you actually expand upon the entire universe?
I went and I handed my writing teacher the first 2 chapters of Stormfront, which were the first one that I wrote. And she read them, and I was waiting for her scathing reply, because that's what she usually had. Her responses would range, the way she would begin her replies were always memorable, because they would range from things like, what were you thinking? To, are you kidding me? To just rolling up the chapters and leaning over the desk and hitting me on the head. Literally. So when she read those, she looked up and said, okay. And I said, okay, what? And she said, okay, you did it. I said, what? She said, you did it. This will sell. This is a saleable quality. I don't know if it'll be the first thing you sell, but you'll be able to sell this eventually. You did it. I did. Because remember, these were the chapters I'd been writing to prove a point to her about how wrong she was about what she was trying to teach me. And I was trying to prove that point by doing everything she told me to. And because I'm a freaking genius. I swear, my entire writing career has been me making a stupid mistake and going, let's roll with that. And it working out. But I said, okay. She's like, well, what happens next? And I had no idea what was going to happen next until she asked me. I said, well, I think I'm going to give him this assistant that is going to be like his magical assistant, because, when he needs to explain magic stuff to the police, that's one thing. But when he's got more advanced stuff, then he needs to have somebody he can go consult about stuff, because I don't want to make him the smartest guy anywhere about it. And she's like, okay, well, that'll be, so you're going to write this assistant, and that seems like a reasonable next step, as long as you don't make him a talking head. Which is writing speak for a character that just shows up and dispenses information and otherwise doesn't have any particular personality or anything like that. He's just there to show information. And the typical talking head character is, the example they use comes from the old pulp science fiction shows, where you have characters show up and say, as you know, the chemical makeup of this shampoo. But if Bob knows already the chemical makeup of this shampoo, why are you even talking to him? That's that kind of character that drives you insane. So she said, don't make a talking head. Instead, I made a literal talking head named Bob. Came back with that next week, and she says, oh, you think you're clever, don't you? And I also turned in at that time an outline. She's like, give me an idea of the outline of the rest of the story. And so then I came in the next week with an outline of the rest of the story, and then the 19 stories that came after that one. And I'm like, do you think 20's enough? And she kind of looks at me, because I'm not bright enough to realize I'm never going to sell a 20-book series to an editor just off the bat. And she just kind of looks at me, and knowing that I'm ignorant and doesn't want to crush my enthusiasm. And she's like, I think if you can sell 20 books, yeah, you should be doing fine. You know, just completely dry. It was, oh my gosh, looking back at it now, it's like, golly, I was dumb. But on the other hand, because I was too dumb to know I was never going to sell that to an editor, I went and sold it to an editor. I sold them 3 books to start with, and I think they only bought the first one because they weren't going to have to do a lot of work to make it ready. You know, basically it was like, we got to have some new guys. Who are we going to pick? Well, this guy's thing is practically done. We're not going to have to do anything to it at all. Get him. We're busy. And he's already got the next 2 written. Great, fine. Do a 3-book deal. And that was the Dresden Files was a 3-book deal at first, just because I had 3 books written. And then after that, they said, yeah, we'll try 2 more. And by then, it started picking up. And then, you know, well, then all of you. But yeah, I mean, that was quite that was probably the smartest dumb thing I've ever done. Do you think 20 books is enough? Yeah, I think it'll be fine. I'm thinking like maybe a big trilogy at the end to cap the whole thing off. Sure, why not? Yeah, sort of a response. Debbie's awesome. She's just extremely cool and always has been. But anyway, hi.
I think we have time for maybe one more question. So
okay,
maybe two.
All right. Well, first of all, this is extremely impressive because I can remember you coming here to our dinky little Phoenix Book Festival, and I was like one of the only people who came up and talked to you afterwards.
I know, right?
Yes.
I just kind of sat there in this booth going,
My brother and you talked about fedoras for like 10 minutes. But back then you mentioned the fact that you love to do a lot of research for your books, and it's very obvious in your books. Do you get frustrated now because you're on more of a deadline and more of a schedule as to if you can get any extra research done, or do you ever feel like you're rushed?
There's my editor right there. I still like doing what I do, and occasionally I think I might drive Anne a little bit crazy because I'm not doing what I do quite as on time as I used to. But there's so much more to do in the writing career that's not actually writing now than there used to be. So, I mean, this year I'm spending more time on the road, kind of doing conventions and stuff like this, than I did in the last 3 years put together, and I've still got more writing to get done. So, I mean, it's become more challenging, and it's like, and I'm not a kid in my 20s with energy to burn anymore. And, you know, I've got to think about all these things, like, oh gosh, I'm going to have to start eating healthy now, and stuff like that. Bad things happen to my body if I don't. I can't just grab some pizza and go back to work. No, you can't. Get that chicken, you know. So, I mean, there's a lot of challenges to face, and one of them is, you know, how do I manage my time so that I can do the research that I need to do to spend the time that I need to spend on the book to make it good, because the books are just getting longer and more involved, and yet still finish it on something like time so that my publisher can plan, you know, how are we going to do our major projects this year? God, I wish Jim Butcher would turn things in on time so we could predict that. But I can only write it as fast as I can write it, get it done as fast as I can write it done. I'm doing my best. I guess we'll see what happens.
One more.
Awesome.
And this is actually a short question. Are we ever going to find out who McNally used to be?
Who McNally used to be?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to find out about Mac, but not probably. So, yeah, as long as you can find out, yeah. Okay. Assuming he's anybody at all, he might not be. I mean, you know. Guys, thank you very, very much for coming. We had announced that my signing was at 1.